Welcome to this episode. Today, we're unpacking a significant piece of history and policy that has quietly shaped higher education in Virginia for over a century. We're talking about Hampton University's exclusion from land-grant status, a decision rooted in segregation-era thinking, and the current efforts to correct that injustice.
Right, Liam. To start, it's important to understand what a land-grant university actually is. The concept dates back to the Morrill Act of 1862, which granted federal land to states to fund colleges focused on agriculture, engineering, and practical education. Then, the Morrill Act of 1890 extended this funding to black colleges in southern states that were still segregated.
So land-grant status isn't just a title. It comes with ongoing federal funding, research grants, infrastructure investment, and cooperative extension programs that serve communities statewide. These universities are engines of economic mobility, public service, and workforce development.
Exactly. And that's why the story of Hampton University is so striking. Despite being founded in 1868 and nationally respected for its agricultural, industrial, and teacher education programs, Hampton was excluded from land-grant funding in Virginia.
That exclusion happened in 1920. What was the reasoning behind it?
The 1920 decision was shaped by segregationist policies. Virginia and federal officials designated only one black land-grant university in the state, Virginia State University, which was then called Virginia Normal and Industrial Institute. Hampton was left out, not because it didn't qualify academically, but because of political and racial considerations.
Can you elaborate on those considerations?
Sure. Funding black education was seen as a concession rather than an investment. White-controlled systems wanted to strictly limit the growth of black institutions. Officials feared that if multiple black universities were well-funded, it would threaten the economic hierarchy that segregation depended on. So federal authorities formally denied Hampton special land-grant funds, stating that Virginia had, quote, fulfilled its obligation by supporting one black institution.
That sounds like a racial quota system. Only one black land-grant institution per state. And this kind of limitation was never applied to white colleges.
Exactly. It was a formal federal denial rooted in segregation-era racial politics, not a neutral or merit-based decision. This was a deliberate act to ration black excellence.
The phrase rationing black excellence really captures the deliberate nature of this exclusion. What were the long-term consequences of this decision?
The impact was profound and compounded over generations. First, Hampton lost out on massive investment. While white land-grant universities accumulated hundreds of millions of dollars over decades, Hampton had to rely on private philanthropy, tuition, and limited state support.
That limited their capacity to grow and innovate.
Absolutely. Without land-grant status, Hampton lacked access to federal agricultural experiment stations, extension services, and long-term research pipelines. This restricted their research capacity significantly.
It also reinforced structural inequality?
Yes. The decision created a false hierarchy, forcing black institutions to compete with each other for legitimacy and resources, while white institutions expanded freely. It also caused generational harm. Students, faculty, farmers, and communities that could have benefited from Hampton-led research and outreach simply never received those services.
So this wasn't accidental. It was policy by design.
Precisely. The exclusion was a deliberate act to ration black excellence and limit black institutional growth.
Fast forward to today. Why are lawmakers pushing to restore Hampton's land-grant status now?
This is part of a broader reckoning with segregation-era laws that were never formally repealed, just ignored. Lawmakers argue that the 1920 decision violates modern principles of equal protection and equity. There's no legal or moral basis for limiting land-grant status to one black institution per state, and federal law doesn't cap the number of eligible institutions.
That's an important point. Is this effort about taking resources away from Virginia State University?
No, and that's a key clarification. The restoration effort is about acknowledging Hampton's unjust exclusion and granting it parallel recognition. It's about equity and correction, not zero-sum resource competition.
What would restoring Hampton's land-grant status actually change on the ground?
The effects would be concrete and measurable. Hampton would gain access to new federal funding streams, agricultural research funding, STEM grants, and infrastructure support that were previously unavailable.
That would open up a lot of opportunities.
Definitely. It would also allow expansion of community-based extension services, programs that support farmers, entrepreneurs, and families, especially in underserved communities statewide. Plus, there would be increased investment in workforce development areas like engineering, environmental science, cybersecurity, and applied research aligned with today's economy.
And beyond Virginia, this would set a national precedent?
Yes. Restoring Hampton's land grant status would signal that historic discrimination can and should be corrected, even decades later. This is not symbolic reform, it's structural repair, policy with the power to heal historic wounds.
Why does this moment matter so much?
Because segregation didn't end simply because laws changed. Many discriminatory policies were never repealed. They were just left standing. The effort to restore Hampton's land grant status asks a fundamental question. If a decision was wrong when made, and its harm is still measurable today, do we have a responsibility to fix it?
And Virginia lawmakers are saying yes.
Exactly. This reversal would remind us that equity isn't about favoritism. It's about honoring commitments that were denied on the basis of race.
To wrap up, for over 100 years, Hampton University was excluded from land-grant funding not because it failed to qualify, but because policymakers believed black excellence must be rationed.
Restoring Hampton's land-grant status is about dismantling a policy built on exclusion and replacing it with one grounded in opportunity, fairness, and truth. History made the wound. Policy has the power to heal.
Well said. Thanks for joining us in this important conversation.
Thanks, Liam. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in.